Imagine a woman who wrote the rules that controlled everyone else. She told them how to live, how to behave, how to think, and she believed she was doing the right thing.
As faithful servants, it is our duty to ensure that the children of Gilead live by the laws of Scripture.
She built a world of discipline, where obedience was law and women had little choice. At the heart of Gilead, the theocratic authoritarian state from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale and the TV series based on it, stands Serena Joy Waterford. It's her ideas that helped lay the foundations of Gilead itself. She convinced an entire generation that her vision of morality was the only way. But there's a cruel twist. Serena believed she was making the world better, creating order and moral clarity. She probably didn't realize she was building a cage for millions of women. Either that, or she didn't care. And she certainly never imagined she would end up trapped in it herself. But slowly, painfully, the rules she helped create began to control her own life.
Back then, did you ever imagine a society like this?
A society that has reduced its carbon emissions by 78% in 3 years?
A society in which women can no longer read your book. Or anything else.
Serena is not just a villain, and she's not just a victim. She's both. She's the architect of Gilead and one of its first prisoners. Today, we're going to unpack her story, why she did what she did, how she ended up trapped in a world of her own making, and what her journey tells us about power, privilege, and the ways women sometimes enforce the very systems that oppress them. Hi, it's Captain Spoiler here, overthinking pop culture again. We're about to dive deep into spoiler territory, so consider yourself warned. Serena Joy Waterford is one of the most complex and fascinating characters in The Handmaid's Tale. She's full of contradictions, at times ruthless and merciless, yet at other moments capable of surprising empathy or courage in defying the system she helped shape. A woman of influence and conviction, she navigates a world that she once believed she could control, but one that ultimately ensnares her. Over the course of the story, she goes through a journey that divides viewers. Did she redeem herself, or, given all the suffering caused by her actions, is she even capable of redeeming herself at all?
Serena, sweetheart, this is what we wanted. Not policies and ideas discussed in the mainstream. You did that.
Before Gilead, Serena Joy was a public powerhouse. She wrote books, gave speeches, and campaigned for a moral revival. By this, she meant a return to traditional values and roles for women. They should focus on the home, support their husbands, raise children, and step away from public life and professional ambition. Her convictions seemed rooted in faith, and her reactionary ideas appeared to respond to a looming fertility crisis. In her mind, Serena wasn't just advocating tradition, she was trying to fix the world as she understood it. And she seemed good at it. Serena had a remarkable ability to captivate and mobilize crowds. She stood before audiences, often facing skepticism or outright opposition, yet could turn controversy into attention and persuade people of the righteousness of her cause. Her charisma and determination made her a force to be reckoned with, drawing others into her vision of morality and order. And yet, here lies the first paradox. While Serena preached that women should stay silent, subservient, and devoted to home and family, she was simultaneously building a public, ambitious career for herself. This tension mirrors the actions of real-world conservative female activists from the 20th century. Women like Phyllis Schlafly, who spoke out against the Equal Rights Amendment, promoted family values, and encouraged a return to traditional roles, all while wielding significant social and political influence. Serena either didn't fully recognize this paradox, or she assumed the rules she promoted applied only to others. Beneath her fervor lies a form of moral narcissism. She evaluates morality and virtue largely from her own perspective, believing her way is the right way, and often failing to consider the perspectives, needs, or desires of others. In her mind, better doesn't mean better for everyone. It means better according to her vision.
This is your second posting, then?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Our last one was brand new. It was like training a dog, only not a very smart one.
Serena wasn't just benefiting from Gilead, she helped lay its ideological foundations. Her speeches, books, and public influence argued that women belong in the home, that motherhood is the ultimate duty and that moral order must be imposed on society. And soon, her ideas became law. Yet the actual organization of Gilead, the creation of handmaids, the rigid hierarchy, the rules governing every aspect of life, was largely the work of men like Commander Lawrence. In many ways, it slipped out of Serena's hands. She didn't invent the details of the system or the handmaids themselves, but she was willing to accept them because she benefited from them, whether through the implementation of her vision, the social status she gained as a commander's wife, or the chance at motherhood that having a handmaid offered her after she was rendered infertile. She didn't enjoy what was happening: the ceremonies, her husband impregnating another woman under her gaze, the ritualized displays of control and power. All of it clearly caused her discomfort, disgust, and frustration. And yet, she couldn't step outside her own perspective to see the handmaid as a person, to feel or offer real compassion. Her focus remained on her own suffering and desires, not on easing the burden of those around her.
What did you think happened to the handmaids? Did you even give it a thought?
No.
From her narcissistic perspective, Serena paid little attention to what life meant for anyone but herself. When her own voice was taken, her right to read, write, or speak freely, she channeled her frustration and sense of lost agency onto those she could still control. Most often, this meant the women in her household, particularly the handmaids. She was ruthless, cruel, and heartless, while rarely considering their perspectives, needs, or suffering. At the same time, Serena acted as if not all the rules applied to her. She smoked black market cigarettes, used her position to bypass some restrictions, and when her husband was hospitalized, even worked on official documents despite the ban on reading. Perhaps she believed she was more important than she really was, or that she could regain some influence over the very state she had helped create. This is a pattern that has echoes in the real world. Throughout history, some conservative activists and right-wing politicians have promoted strict moral codes, traditional family values, or laws governing personal behavior, while simultaneously bending or ignoring those same rules in their own lives. They act as if the law or moral code applies to everyone but themselves, believing their own situation is exceptional. Serena's selective adherence reflects the same mix of moral authority and personal exception. She expects obedience from others, but assumes her own status and intellect place her above the rules she enforces. Convinced of her own exceptional status, she even went a step further, trying to regain her influence and proposing reforms to allow girls to learn to read, an audacious suggestion that revealed for the first time the limits of her power in Gilead. While Fred could tolerate some of her behaviors and opinions privately within their household, he could not allow her to challenge the system publicly. This moment revealed the full extent of her limitations. Any misstep could cost Serena her status, her safety, and the fragile authority she still held within her household. Psychologists might call her position a patriarchal bargain. Serena accepted and enforced restrictions on women in exchange for security, social status, and a degree of symbolic power within her household and the broader society of Gilead. By complying with the rules, participating in the ceremonies, disciplining the handmaids, and upholding the moral code she helped create, she gained influence and protection that most women could never hope for. But these bargains were inherently fragile. They only functioned as long as Serena remained useful to the system and did not challenge its core structure. The moment she stepped too far, pushing for reforms, testing limits, or expressing dissent, her position became precarious. The very framework she had helped establish, which promised order and control, could, and eventually did, turn against her, demonstrating the cruel logic of a system built on enforcing obedience rather than equity.
I did this for Nicole. I did it to set an example for our daughter.
So you have.
No.
For Serena, the awakening is brutal. It begins when she is violently punished for trying to assert her voice and push reforms. Her finger is cut off, a stark message that in Gilead, no woman is truly safe, not even her. Only now does it fully sink in. She has no real authority, no real agency, and her daughter will have none either. In the eyes of the system, she is not so different from the countless women trapped in the cage she helped build. In a moment of desperation, she sets fire to her house and allows June to take Nicole to Canada, fearing for her daughter's safety and future. This is her cognitive rupture, the shattering moment when ideology meets unyielding reality. Serena always believed she could navigate Gilead, that her status, influence, and insight would shield her from its harshest consequences. But now, confronted with the brutal enforcement of rules she once helped shape, she realizes how little control she truly has. The privileges she once took for granted are stripped away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. For the first time, Serena sees Gilead not as a framework for order and morality, but as a cage, inescapable and unforgiving. The rituals she once upheld, the hierarchy she maintained, and the women she disciplined all become mirrors of her own entrapment. It's a moment of painful clarity. The system she helped build is not a tool she can command, but a structure that can and will turn against her. This rupture doesn't erase her beliefs overnight. Instead, it creates a tension between the world she envisioned and the reality she now inhabits, forcing her to confront the bitter irony of being both architect and prisoner. Yet even now, she clings to the system, trying to smooth its rough edges rather than reject it outright. Psychologically, this is partly a result of the investments she has made over a lifetime in Gilead, the privileges she still holds, and her inability, or unwillingness, to confront the full scope of harm the system inflicts. Her rebellion is cautious because it must be. Abandoning Gilead entirely would mean losing everything she has fought for, exposing herself and her child to even greater danger. That irony of being both creator and victim is made painfully clear in Season 5, when Serena, now pregnant and following Fred's death, is sent as an ambassador to Canada. On paper, she holds a position of authority, yet she is again a prisoner, threatened with losing her child to another couple, almost like a handmaid.
I'm not gonna live in the same house as my child's kidnappers.
Do you have an irony deficiency?
Controlled by the Wheelers and confined under their roof, she is treated as property rather than a guest, her supposed power exposed as illusion. When she finally escapes, her flight becomes both physical and psychological. On the run, she begins to see herself as a victim of the system she once defended and draws parallels between her own fate and June's. This is a moment of cognitive dissonance. Serena is forced to reconcile her long-held belief that Gilead was just and manageable with the reality of her own vulnerability and lack of control. When the system ultimately strips her of dignity and remaining power, she performs a psychological maneuver, stepping fully into the role of victim. By aligning herself with others who suffer under Gilead, she can avoid confronting her own complicity and shift responsibility onto the system.
It seems like all of us here, at some point or another, were a part of some kind of violence.
Yet, even in that moment of shared vulnerability, Serena cannot see how much safer and more protected she was all the way through. And even now, she frames her own suffering as undeserved, while viewing the pain of other women as a natural consequence of their failings. She positions herself as morally superior, convinced that her hardships are unjust, while theirs are justified.
You were unfit. I am not responsible for your tragedies. Your children were not taken from you. They weren't stolen. They were saved.
Serena, shut.
God hated America because America turned their back on God. And God took your country away. God bless America. Serena.
Her defiance is real, but temporary, a survival strategy rather than a transformation. When offered the chance to return, she takes it. Presented with the promise of influence as the face of New Bethlehem, a slightly relaxed mini Gilead without handmaids, Serena accepts. It's both a pragmatic move and a self-deception, another attempt to regain status while convincing herself she's part of positive change. She never truly rejects the system. She simply searches for a version of it where she can matter. This is another moment her characteristic opportunism is on full display. Serena knows how to act when it serves her interests. She testifies against Fred to protect herself, stages a spectacle at his funeral to score points with Gilead, and marries Commander Wharton to secure power and stability. Her maneuvers are calculated, self-serving, and designed to preserve both her safety and her position. Even as the system repeatedly reminds her of her limits, she exploits every opening to turn events to her advantage. But Gilead's patriarchal logic is relentless. The system continues to feed her illusions while keeping her subordinate. Commander Wharton might praise Serena's intellect, admire her vision, and act as though he respects her influence. But beneath that facade, he still treats her as property. In the logic of Gilead, no amount of admiration cancels the expectation of dominance. Her opinions can inspire him, but her choices are never truly her own. After the wedding, Wharton brings a handmaid into their household, despite Serena's belief that this marriage would shield her from such rituals. The sight throws her into panic because it makes brutally clear that she has once again been deceived by the system, stripped of choice, denied intimacy, and reduced to the same powerless role she had hoped to escape. Her desperate attempt to urge the handmaid to flee exposes both her terror and her blindness. She fails to see that the handmaid has nowhere safe to go. This moment shows that even when Serena pushes back against the system, she still can't recognize the extent of her own privilege or the full horror she has imposed on others. Serena's journey is a study in the contradictions of power. She remains a guardian of patriarchy, navigating and enforcing rules she knows are unjust, while trying, often imperfectly, to steer the system toward what she sees as fairness. Her attempts at reform are cautious and self-serving, aimed at patching visible flaws rather than dismantling a fundamentally broken structure. She accepts provisional changes and temporary allowances, mistaking them for true authority, and her rebellion is selective, pragmatic, and partial, always seeking to improve her own position and correct certain injustices, but never fully freeing herself or those trapped alongside her. Serena Joy Waterford teaches us some hard truths. Women can be architects of oppressive systems and still suffer under them. Privilege and power complicate the notion of victimhood, and changing a system from within can be incomplete, addressing surface-level problems while leaving the foundations intact. Her story is a stark reminder that even creators of power can become its prisoners, and that empathy is often limited by perspective and personal experience. Serena is neither a simple villain nor a simple victim. She is both, a warning, a puzzle, and one of the most compelling figures in The Handmaid's Tale. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like this video, here's another one you might find interesting.